The waves whispered restlessly against the shore as the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in molten gold. In a quiet fishing village where bamboo huts leaned against the wind, a young man named Arga lived a life of endless struggle. His hands were rough from years of casting nets that rarely returned with enough to feed himself, let alone his ailing mother waiting at home. The other fishermen often mocked him, calling him unlucky, cursed even, for the sea never seemed to grant him its bounty. Yet, despite their laughter, Arga never gave up. Each dawn, barefoot and weary, he pushed his fragile wooden boat into the water, chasing hope on the waves. But Arga was not like the others. Beneath his poverty and weariness, he carried a heart that beat with quiet defiance. When he looked at the sea, he did not only see survival. He saw mystery. He saw beauty. Sometimes, when the night was still and the moon turned the water into silver glass, he thought he felt something watching him from beneath the surface. A shiver would run through him, not of fear, but of something he could not explain, like a silent promise that the sea held secrets meant for him alone. One evening, as he sat by the shoreline with his broken net in his lap, he whispered into the rolling waves, almost as if speaking to someone he knew could hear. "Why do you always take from me? Am I not worthy of your gifts?" His voice trembled, part anger, part longing. The water shimmered faintly under the moonlight, and for a heartbeat, he swore he saw a shadow move gracefully just beneath the surface. His breath caught, but when he blinked, it was gone, leaving only ripples that reached toward his feet as though in answer. Arga stared into the vast expanse of the ocean, his heart restless, unaware that this was the beginning of a story that would bind his fate to something far greater than his village, his hunger, or even his own understanding of love. For deep within those waves, a pair of eyes had already found him, watching with curiosity and something far more dangerous, desire. On the following night, when the moon was swollen and bright, Arga once again pushed his small boat into the water, the wooden oar creaking against the current. The sea was strangely calm, as though it had been waiting. The air smelled different, heavy with salt and something sweet, a fragrance he had never known before. His heart beat faster without reason, as though the silence around him carried a secret. He cast his net half-heartedly, already expecting it to return empty, but his gaze kept drifting to the water's surface, shimmering in greenish silver. Suddenly, a whisper rode the wind, soft yet clear, calling his name. His hand froze on the rope, his body rigid. Arga. The sound was like silk brushing against his ears, feminine yet ancient, carrying the weight of tides and storms. He looked around wildly, but there was no one, only the sea. Then the water rippled, glowing faintly as if lit from beneath. A figure rose from the waves, her form luminous, her long black hair flowing like strands of midnight ink. She wore a flowing gown the color of emerald, adorned with golden patterns that shimmered like sunlight breaking on the ocean's crest. Her beauty was unlike anything he had ever seen, human yet unearthly, her eyes deep as the abyss, carrying both tenderness and warning. Arga's breath left him in a rush, his heart hammering in disbelief. He wanted to speak, but his throat was dry. She, however, smiled faintly, her voice echoing like the pull of the tide. "You have called, and I have heard." The world around him seemed to fade. The stars dimmed, the air thickened, and only her presence filled his senses. He realized then that the sea itself had answered his plea, and before him stood not a dream, but the living legend whispered in every tale told by firelight. And in that moment, the boy who had always been ignored by the ocean found himself face to face with its queen. But as Arga's awe-filled eyes met hers, a shiver of fear slid down his spine. He knew the stories. Every child in the village grew up with them. Tales of Nyi Roro Kidul, the sea goddess, who could grant fortune or unleash destruction, who lured men into her embrace only to take them beneath the waves forever. Yet standing before him now, she did not look like a monster. She looked like sorrow wrapped in beauty, her gaze both tender and piercing. "Do not fear me," she said softly, her voice carrying over the water without effort. "You called and I came. You asked why the sea denies you. The answer is simple. You are bound to a fate that keeps you empty so that you would seek me." Her words wrapped around him like a net, pulling him closer to a truth he could not yet understand. Arga shook his head, his voice finally breaking free. "I only wanted to feed my mother. I never meant to summon anyone, least of all you." His words trembled, but his eyes did not look away from her. Something in her presence, overwhelming as it was, held him steady. The goddess tilted her head, her lips curving into a faint smile that was neither cruel nor kind. "And yet, here we are. Perhaps it is destiny that drew your voice to my ears. Perhaps it is desire." She moved closer, the waves parting around her form as though the ocean itself made way for its mistress. Arga stumbled backward, his boat rocking dangerously, but her gaze held him firm. That night, when he finally returned to shore, the echo of her voice clung to him like salt on his skin. He could not sleep, haunted not by fear, but by a dangerous yearning. Every word she spoke replayed in his mind, and the villagers' warnings about the sea goddess felt weaker with each breath. For the first time, Arga was torn not between hunger and survival, but between reason and a forbidden pull that threatened to consume him. And when the sun rose, painting the sky with fire, he knew he would return to the ocean, not for fish, not for survival, but for her. The next night, his feet carried him back to the shore almost against his will. His mother's weak coughs echoed from their hut, a reminder of his duty, yet the memory of the goddess's voice drowned every hesitation. He pushed his boat into the water once more, his hands trembling with something more dangerous than hunger, longing. The sea was darker this time, restless under a sky heavy with clouds. When she appeared again, rising from the waves with her emerald gown glistening like living light, Arga's heart both leapt and sank. She studied him silently, her eyes deep and searching. "You returned," she said, not as a question, but as a fact, as if she had always known he would. "I had to," Arga whispered, though the words felt small against the enormity of her presence. "I don't understand why, but I can't stay away." His voice cracked, torn between defiance and surrender. Her smile faded, replaced with something colder, sharper. "And yet, to come to me is to step into danger. Your kind fears me for a reason. Men who give themselves to me are never the same again." The waves around her began to churn, the glow beneath the water darkening to a stormy green. "If you continue down this path, you will lose more than you can imagine. Your family, your life, even your soul." Arga swallowed hard, but he did not look away. "If the sea has taken everything from me already, then what more do I have to lose?" His words cut through the night, bold yet desperate, and for a moment, even the waves seemed to pause. The goddess's eyes softened, a flicker of conflict flashing within them. She turned her face away, as if hiding something dangerous behind her beauty. "I do not yet understand the weight of what you ask. Love between us is forbidden. To defy that law is to invite ruin, not only upon yourself, but upon all who know you." The storm thickened above them, thunder rumbling as though the heavens themselves listened in disapproval. But Arga, drenched in spray, stood firm on his fragile boat, staring at her as though nothing else in the world mattered. And in the silence that followed, she whispered so softly he almost thought it was the sea itself speaking. "Then let ruin come." The words echoed through Arga's chest long after she sank back into the restless sea, leaving him alone beneath the storm-heavy sky. He rowed back to the shore with his heart in turmoil, knowing he had crossed a line he could never return from. The village lay in silence when he arrived, but his mother was awake, sitting weakly by the oil lamp, her frail hands clasped as though she had been waiting for him. "Where have you gone, Arga?" she asked, her voice thin and trembling. "The sea has kept you too long these nights. I fear it whispers to you." Her eyes, clouded with age, seemed to peer straight into his soul. He opened his mouth to lie, but the weight of her gaze silenced him. Instead, he sat by her side and held her hand, saying only, "I'm trying, Mother. I'm trying to give us more." But whispers began to spread through the village. The fisherman noticed how often he went out alone at night, how his eyes seemed distant, how sometimes his lips moved as though he were speaking to someone unseen. Children pointed at him, muttering about curses. Old women clutched their charms tighter whenever he walked past. They remembered the legends and saw the signs, and soon suspicion grew like a storm cloud over his name. Arga tried to ignore them, but every night the call of the sea grew stronger, and every night she was there, waiting. Her beauty no longer frightened him, it consumed him. She spoke of mysteries in the depths, of treasures and kingdoms hidden beneath the waves, of love unbound by mortal laws. Her words painted visions that dazzled his heart, even as dread coiled in his mind. Yet with each meeting, he noticed a shadow in her eyes, as if she carried sorrow too great for her perfect form. Sometimes when the moonlight touched her face, she looked almost fragile, like a queen trapped in her own crown. "Why do you come to me, Arga?" she asked one night, her voice softer than the tide. "Is it love you seek, or escape from the life that has broken you?" He could not answer, for the truth was tangled. Perhaps it was both. And as the days passed, his mother's condition worsened. The villagers' distrust sharpened into anger, and Arga found himself standing between two worlds, one that demanded duty and one that promised love, forbidden by gods and men alike. It was on a night heavy with stars when the weight of that choice nearly crushed him. He sat at his mother's side, listening to her shallow breaths, when she grasped his hand with surprising strength. "Arga," she whispered, her eyes glassy with both fever and fear. "Promise me you will not stray too close to the sea. I have seen its mark on you. Do not let it claim you as it claimed your father." Her words struck him like lightning. He had always been told his father drowned in a storm, but never had he heard it said with such bitter finality. 1,000 questions burned on his tongue, but his mother's sudden coughing fit silenced them. He stayed with her until she slept, but the unease gnawed at him. The next evening, as though to seek answers, he returned once more to the ocean. The waves welcomed him with a strange calm, and soon she rose again from the waters, radiant and dangerous, her eyes luminous in the moonlight. He could not hold back the question, "Did you know my father?" Her silence was long, and when she finally spoke, it was not with denial. "The sea takes, Arga, sometimes gently, sometimes cruelly, but every soul it claims becomes part of me." Her gaze did not falter, though sorrow flickered in its depths. Your father's fate was bound to the ocean long before he ever set sail." Arga's blood ran cold, his mind reeling with the implication. Was his father claimed by her? Was his obsession the same dangerous thread Arga now followed? His fists clenched, torn between rage and longing. "If you are the reason I grew up without a father, why should I not hate you?" The goddess stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, her voice low and dangerous. "Because hate is not what burns in your heart when you look at me." Her hand reached out, her fingers just above his cheek, but she stopped short, trembling, as if bound by some invisible law. "And because whether you hate me or love me, your soul already belongs to the sea." The truth hit him like a wave, leaving him breathless. His father's shadow haunted him, his mother's warnings pierced him, and yet the pull of the goddess was stronger than ever. He was drowning, not in water, but in choices he could not escape. And somewhere in the distance, as thunder rumbled faintly over the horizon, the first signs of a greater storm began to gather. The sea grew wilder with each passing night, waves lashing against the shore as though warning of what was to come. Villagers whispered that Nyi Roro Kidul was restless, that someone had dared cross the line between mortal and divine, and that punishment would soon fall upon them all. Every look they cast at Arga was sharp with accusation. On the night the storm finally arrived, the heavens split open with rain and lightning, and the ocean roared like a beast unleashed. Arga's mother clung to him, begging him not to go near the sea, but a voice, her voice, called to him above the howling wind. He could not resist. With reckless desperation, he ran to the shore, his clothes soaked, his heart hammering, and there she was, Nyi Roro Kidul rising from the furious waves, like a vision both terrifying and magnificent. "Arga," she cried, her voice thunder and silk. "You must choose now. Stay in your world with its chains and frailty, or come to me and embrace eternity. But know this, if you step into my embrace tonight, there will be no return. Your soul, your bloodline, your destiny, all will belong to the sea." The storm raged around them. The villagers gathered at a distance, shouting prayers and curses, terrified to come closer, but unwilling to look away. Arga stood at the edge of the water, his body trembling. Behind him was his dying mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. Before him was the goddess who had awakened his heart, a forbidden love that burned brighter than any fire. The waves surged higher, crashing over his knees, as if urging him forward. He looked into her eyes, saw both promise and damnation reflected there, and for the first time, he realized she too was bound by chains. Chains of divinity, of law, of fate. Her trembling hand reached toward him, her lips whispering, "I cannot hold back the sea much longer. Choose me or lose me forever." The storm's roar grew deafening, the villagers screamed for him to turn back, and his mother's fragile voice echoed in his mind. The world hung suspended in that single heartbeat, waiting for Arga's choice. And then, he took a step into the raging water. The sea swallowed his legs, pulling him with a strength far beyond his own, but Arga fought against it, his arms thrashing, his voice breaking through the storm. "If you want me, then let me choose how I come to you," he shouted, his cry filled with defiance and desperation. For a heartbeat, the waves hesitated, as though the ocean itself was stunned by his resistance. Nyi Roro Kidul's eyes widened, shimmering with something he had never seen in her before. Fear. "Arga, you do not understand," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "The sea takes, it does not wait. If you surrender, you live with me forever. If you resist, it may devour you whole." But Arga's mind flashed with images. His mother's frail body, her words heavy with sorrow, the father he never knew swallowed by the waves, the life of hunger and shame that had crushed him. And then her face, the goddess who had haunted his every thought, who had bound his heart with threads he could no longer untangle. He realized then that this was not only about love, but about his right to choose his fate when all his life had been dictated by suffering. With a primal roar, Arga pushed forward into the water, not as a man begging to be saved, but as one demanding to claim his destiny. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the impossible sight of a mortal defying the sea itself. The villagers fell to their knees, some crying prayers, others cursing his name, while his mother, weak and shivering in her hut, whispered through her tears, "Arga, come back to me." The ocean rose, a wall of water cowering above him, threatening to crash down and end his life. Yet before it could, Nyi Roro Kidul raised her hand, her power surging like a storm within her. Her voice rang clear through the chaos. Enough! The waves froze mid-crash, trembling as though caught between her will and the fury of nature itself. She turned to Arga, her expression torn between anguish and awe. "No mortal has ever stood against me so. Your strength, your love, it may destroy you, but it may also save us both." Her hand reached out once more, closer this time, the distance between them no more than a breath. And Arga, soaked, shaking, and on the edge of collapse, lifted his hand to meet hers. "Then let me fight with you, not as your prisoner, not as your possession, but as your equal." And as their fingers touched, the storm shuddered, the waves buckled, and for a moment the entire sea seemed to hold its breath. Power surged through Arga, cold and searing at once, as though the ocean itself tested his worth. His knees nearly gave way, but he clenched his jaw and refused to let go of her hand. Nyi Roro Kidul's eyes glistened, her voice breaking into something more fragile than divine command. "You defy the sea itself, Arga. No mortal has ever dared. If you falter now, the ocean will consume you, body and soul." His chest heaved with exhaustion, but his grip tightened, unwavering. "Then let it consume me. I would rather be swallowed whole fighting for love than live empty and afraid." The towering wave above them collapsed, but instead of crushing destruction, it dissolved into 1,000 streams of light that cascaded around them like falling stars. The villagers gasped, shielding their faces, their curses turning into stunned silence. The furious storm softened, the winds stilled, and the sea slowly bowed into calm, as though submitting to the bond forged between mortal and goddess. Nyi Roro Kidul fell into his arms, her regal composure broken, her tears warm against his skin. "You have done what I believed impossible. You have bound me not with fear, not with chains, but with love." Her voice trembled, carrying both relief and surrender. "And for that, Arga, the ocean itself must obey you." At that moment, a soft cry rose from the shore. His mother, frail and weak, had been carried by neighbors to witness what she believed would be his son's doom. Yet as she saw him alive, holding the goddess who had once taken her husband, she broke into sobs of both grief and joy. Arga rushed to his mother's side, guiding Nyi Roro Kidul with him, and placed his mother's trembling hand into the goddess's. "Mother," Arga whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I chose her, but I also chose us. I will not abandon you. If love can tame the sea, then it can heal our wounds too." The goddess knelt beside his mother, her divine pride humbled. "I wronged you once, taking from you what could never be replaced. Let me mend what I can. You will not lose your son as you lost your husband." She placed her palm gently against the old woman's chest, and in an instant the rattle of shallow breath eased. Her body warmed with strength, and her eyes lit with clarity she had not felt in years. The villagers who had gathered in fearful awe now fell to their knees, not in defiance, but in reverence.
For the first time, they looked at Arga not as a cursed boy, but as a man who had bridged two worlds, saving both his mother and their shores. And as dawn broke over the tranquil sea, the boy who had once been nothing more than a poor outcast now stood hand in hand with the sea goddess, their love no longer forbidden, but blessed by the very waters that had tried to tear them apart.
Time passed, and the village slowly transformed under the shadow of this miracle. No longer did the people curse Arga's name or whisper that he was doomed. Instead, they spoke of him with reverence, a mortal who had faced the fury of the sea and returned not as a victim, but as its protector. Fishermen found the waters kinder, storms less frequent, and the tides more forgiving. They believed it was because Nyi Roro Kidul herself now watched over them, bound not by power or worship, but by love. Arga's life also changed, though not in the way he had once dreamed. He did not live in wealth or glory, but in purpose. He spent his days helping the villagers, repairing boats, teaching children to fish, and caring for his mother, who, with renewed health, found joy in her twilight years. And on nights when the moon painted the ocean silver, Nyi Roro Kidul would appear, not as an untouchable queen of the deep, but as a woman who had chosen to share her heart. They would walk along the shore together, sometimes in silence, sometimes laughing as though no gods or curses had ever stood between them. Yet even as happiness settled into their lives, Arga understood a truth that would remain forever. Love was not without sacrifice. He could never belong fully to the sea, and she could never abandon it. Their bond was a fragile thread stretched between two worlds, tested by time, distance, and the laws of fate. But it was also unbreakable because it had been forged in defiance, strengthened by loss, and sanctified by choice. In the end, the villagers no longer feared the goddess of the southern sea. They built shrines not to beg her mercy, but to honor the love story that had spared them from ruin. Children grew up hearing the tale of the poor boy and the sea goddess, and in every telling, they learned the same lesson, that destiny is not written by birth, nor by fear, nor even by the gods themselves. It is written by the courage to choose and by the strength to love despite the cost. And so Arga's name was carried not by whispers of pity, but by waves of legend. And whenever the ocean sighed against the shore, the people believed it was the sea itself whispering his story, a reminder that even the mightiest tide could bow to the power of a human heart.